All right, here we go. Cool. Good to see already. Many people have joined, which is great. We'll just give it a few minutes so everybody has the time to join into our first All Guilds webinar, Ask an Expert. Yes, I think while we wait for all the people to join and give it a couple of minutes, I think we can already talk a little bit about this community contributed COVID-19 resource database we've started to put together on SEA is one of the initiatives how we try to cope with everything that's going on, right? And you can probably see it on the screen, on your screen. And this is the database we put together where you can find resources that are meant for deeper dives into topics related to COVID-19. There's also, as you can see, a flash survey with the main intention of just getting a broad, good understanding of what's happening, what do our communities need, so we can also dive deeper into those topics specifically where people see a lot of gaps or like have a lot of interest in. Then we do have just below that, the other yellow button is the submit a resource, where you can, if you have videos, if you have authority links, PDFs, anything that's useful, anything your communities put together, anything that helps in these times, you can put in, and we definitely encourage you highly to participate and also contribute towards this database. And if going down a little bit, you can see the database, which is already packed with some resources, and you can also search for different scenarios or different categories, right, with different thumbnails. And one, as you can see on the very far right, is also food. So that's definitely related to our topic that we talk about today, right? With food health and COVID-19. Which is the perfect transition to our introduction of who we have today here. And I'm very happy that we're able to hold this webinar. I'm Richard Stiller. Hi, I'm based in Germany, so I'm calling in from Germany at the moment. And I'm very happy that I'm joined by Jessie May Peters. Hi, Jessie, who's the chair of the Barista Guild. Also by Jen Apodaca. Hi, Jen, chair of the Coffee Roasters Guild. Hylan, who's the chair of the Coffee Technicians Guild, who's not on video but on audio, so you'll be able to hear him. And finally, also the expert, and I'm very happy that you joined us, Mike, for today's session. Hi.
Hello.
Perfect. So I think we can already start right into it. How we're going to do the session, basically, the idea is, and I'm very happy this is going to be hopefully the first of very many that we go through interesting, crazy times at the moment. I think we can all agree on that. And to bring all resources together, all communities together, having similar questions. And here our chairs of the different guilds are basically representing those communities, and we'll ask a lot of questions on behalf of their constituencies. The idea mainly is to dive into topics that are related, that interest you, where we can hopefully also add to the conversation, showcase some things that you might be interested in, might learn, might take away a lot, hopefully, where you can see how to implement things and how we can all cope with COVID-19 that's ongoing around the globe and daily changing. So I'm very happy that Mike is joining, and he will be doing a short, so I guess like 20-30 minutes introduction to the topic, and then we'll have questions from the communities delivered by the chairs who joined for today. So I'm handing over the virtual microphone to Mike. Thank you very much for joining, and the floor is yours.
Okay, let me just wait till I get control. And you all see the screen? Well, welcome. Certainly trying times around the world. So a couple of things before I kind of dive into this is, one, the term expert, not to beat myself up, but I don't think anyone's an expert on this. I have a unique place where I sit and what I do for a living in food safety. I have access to lots of information. So, but this is a moving target. The second thing I'd point out is it was really tough in a couple days, but put together a presentation that fits both small and large companies. So I think I've threaded that needle pretty good, but please, as you're going through that, think about that. And then also understand this is a moving target. And I'll explain that there are things we don't know. There are things that'll probably change. There are things that'll probably change because of hysteria, not necessarily based in fact. And that's our role, to be vigilant. So, and kind of the last comment is you will find some of the resources and stuff I've supplied, it's very US focused. Obviously, that's where I'm based. I'm outside Chicago. It's the market I know well, but I'm tied to food safety firms that do what I do throughout the world. So one of the things I've committed to is to continue to add resources for other countries, because some of the guidance is even city by city in the US. So imagine the rest of the world. So no further ado, I'm going to dive right in if I can get my slide to be changing. So objectives, kind of what I'm trying to cover is just first some perspective on how it's affecting the big picture. Some of this you may have heard. Some of it is as recent as an FDA stakeholder webinar yesterday that I was on for 2 hours, some updates on this. So food supply shortages. Will we be forced to do recalls if we have somebody sick in our plant? And then kind of the whole supply chain. What's it going to look like going forward? So that's my starting point. And then we're going to get into the impact. And kind of the immediate is you have somebody who it does test positive. What should you be doing? And then talk about prevention in the workplace, which is going to be a review of GMPs, which is cleaning, infectious illness policy, and lunchrooms, quality control cupping. What do we do there? Importance of doing some cross training. So that's things that you can do and take home on your own. So we're going to start with, is our food supply safe? So the plus here is that both CDC, FDA, the WHO, EFSCA, which is the European Food Safety Authority, all basically are agreeing that food does not appear to serve as a transmission route for this virus. Okay, that and I'm going to touch on that in a few more slides, a couple more times with a little bit more authority. There is the surfaces that we need to be maybe a little concerned about. Will we have shortages? And this comes right from the FDA that I'll allude to in a little bit. That no, short term, yes, there's a supply and demand. Just simply, we went through basically multiple days of Thanksgiving type shopping, but the food supply is fine. However, that is one of the concerns on what happens with gatherings of over 10, 20, 50 people. Some companies who make food have big plants. So we'll touch on that a little bit deeper. So to first answer the question, is it transmitted via food? And this has been confirmed by, and you'll notice many times through this presentation that I allude to the WHO, so the World Health Organization, CDC here in the United States. I go back and forth because it's many people are weighing in, and with the hysteria, sometimes what is weighed in isn't fact. So you got to look at multiple sources. But it appears that it's not a source of transmission. It's respiratory, okay, not gastrointestinal, okay? So you're going to see when I go through this is that the FDA isn't really concerned about it as a potential foodborne illness outbreak, okay? They have other concerns, which I'll touch on in a second. So doesn't appear to be transmitted by food. How it is, and this is nothing new. This has been in the news, okay? But how does it spreading? Human interactions, respiratory droplets, close contact, okay? And so that there's much deeper information on that. I'm not a medical professional, so I'm not going to get into that, but that appears to be what we're hearing from just about everyone. But this is also the key as I move on in a food safety environment for your warehouse of green coffee, your roasting plant, your whatever. You got to understand your hazards and then how to prevent them. So the key to understanding how it spreads is how to prevent. Okay. Via surfaces. So this is just recently, CDC and the WHO both said it's likely a very low risk. Okay, especially for stuff transported, that takes a long time, long distribution, right, more than a day or two. Okay, this was just released by the New England Journal of Medicine on different times that it will stay without cleaning. It will stay basically where it could still get you sick. Okay, still active. Okay, there are other studies out there. I'll be honest. Okay, what I did is I've looked for the last couple days. There's 4 or 5 different studies. WHO and CDC basically support this. There was a couple that said maybe it's not quite as long. Again, this is a moving target. They are just starting to test this. Okay, but this is, if you look at cardboard, and a paper cup of coffee, 1 day. Okay, so that gives you some inkling into possibly gloves, possibly masks and stuff in those type of environments. But again, there's no official guidance on that. This is something I think we're going to have deeper studies and more information coming in the coming week on this. So that's what we're seeing so far. And then the whole supply chain. And this is kind of a report from this meeting, this webinar the FDA had just a couple days ago. They are actively involved with the task force that's working with all these health organizations, not just US based, but worldwide, and really to assure our supply of chain of food. Okay. My next slide, I'll talk about what they're going to be focused on, which also to me further supports that we don't have to worry about our food supply transmitting this. Okay. But the NCA also just released, the National Coffee Association. There was a letter that Bill Murray sent out that they are trying to get some support over, large food manufacturers in our industry, coffee, may have more than 500 people reporting to a shift in a given day, or even more than 100. Though, is coffee essential? I think it is for life, but maybe not other food products. But this is what the FDA is actively involved in, and I can go into great depth, but we don't have time today, on everything they're taking a look at, from the supply chain to transportation and the like, to make sure that some of this hysteria doesn't shut down food plants, because then we would have a problem with supply chain. But right now, Frank Yanis, who is I believe he's the executive deputy director of the FDA, basically, assured multiple times that currently they see no issues in the next couple months. But this is something to pay attention to. So what they are going to be focused on, and this is again more under the heading of, so you understand what's being done from the FDA's perspective, but why they don't consider it a food being a transmission, and so they need to be concerned about it. They're focused on, number one, and you've seen some of this, the development of medical countermeasures, getting things to market quicker, cutting through some of the red tape, getting regulatory advice and guidance out there, working with medical product companies, looking at the blood supply and making sure that, if you need blood, you'll get it. But also, and you've probably seen this recently, protecting the consumer from fraudulent products. You've probably seen in the news some of the people who've tried to make make their million on selling homemade hand disinfectant and finding out it is not really effective. So that's what they're really focused on. And FDA, they do really care about our food supply being safe. So this is telling me not only are they not worried about COVID-19 being a way that it can be transmitted through food. They're more concerned about people taking advantage and making mistakes. So that's going to be their focus. Okay. So what is the real impact? Well, what is it really, going to hit us in coffee? Okay, in the complete supply chain. Well, first I'd like to start with, we got to make an assumption. More than likely, from the data we're seeing, you're going to have an employee who tests positive. So what do you do? Okay. So to me, the immediate step to take is think about that. What's your protocol? So Side note, there are some documents and references that I've curated that are going to go into that resource that Richard pointed out that help back this up, how to, from CDC and the WHO, how to what are the symptoms to what should they do, okay? And this should be something that you talk to all your employees about, okay? If you have somebody who does test positive, you need to inform all the employees immediately. There's no FDA guidance on what to do from there. You need to get in touch with your local health officials, okay? One of the guidance documents that I did provide is from the National Restaurant Association that gives state by state links and people to contact in the US. And again, this is something outside the US I am working and have committed to getting more resources for different countries on what that looks like in those countries, okay? So you need to inform all your employees, work with local health officials on what they may require. Clean and sanitize, and we're going to touch on that a little bit more. Also in the resources I have supplied, EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, recommended cleaners, which already have to be approved by the EPA to use in a food plant, but they've created a list of what is recommended to kill COVID-19. So that has been supplied in there. So clean and sanitize, and then, can you do some employee separation? And this is a case-by-case basis. Some plants, the way they package coffee, there's no way, they got to be side by side. Sometimes you have the option that you can maybe keep some separation. This is both from a risk management of not getting all your employees sick, but also hopefully having enough employees still to roast and ship coffee, keep our part of the supply chain going, okay? So that's a case by case, but if it can be done, I know larger companies that have already have separate entrances for different employees and different shifts. Different shifts aren't allowed to communicate with each other, just more from a risk management. Yes, it's to keep their employees safe, but also they want to keep the company in business so everybody can still get a paycheck. So some sort of employee separation might be something you'd look at short term. Mask and gloves, should this be a requirement? This again is as in anything in food safety, is a company by company decision. You need to look at the hazards that we've gone through, and is that something that is required, okay, in certain areas, in open coffee. Should you check temperatures? I know some companies that are starting to do this. As employees are coming in the door, they are checking just to make sure. So do you have to do that? There is no guidance that says you have to. Each operation is different. Can some work from home? We've already seen this. I'm working, as you can see, this is the basement compound of Fire Dancer that I'm hiding in. I have that luxury to do it. Some can't, but if there's some separation, start having some discussions about cross-training, okay, backup planning. If your head roaster gets sick, do you have a backup transportation company if they shut down? But most importantly, a complete food safety review. So this is something that when I was first asked to do this and I talked with the guild leadership, they all had a list of questions and they wanted a little bit more pointed information. And quite honestly, currently, as we're about to in the next couple of slides, find out that what is already in place under FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act in the US, there's no changes to that as a result of this. But we're going to go through that in a little bit. There are some areas that you may want to focus on, but there's no changes even being considered at this moment to address COVID-19 because food does not consider it a transmission source, okay? However, I think it's a good time to review your food safety, okay? So one of the things I'll touch on this in a little bit, was very clear by Frank Yanis of the FDA that if you have someone sick with COVID-19 in your facility, they are not going to require putting food on hold, putting coffee on hold, or recall. They do not see this even as a likely potential, even unlikely, okay? So you would not be forced to do a recall. However, infectious disease is part of FSMA. It's part of good manufacturing practices in the US. The rest of the world, they're called prerequisite programs. These are the basics any food company needs to have in place. So if you don't have, this is an infectious disease. So if you don't have something in place, you could have some problems. So we're going to go through that. But a starting point is to understand kind of the definition on a worldwide basis of food safety. Okay, it's related to hazards that we're aware of at the intake by the consumer. And as a member of that chain, no matter where you're at, we need to have adequate control throughout that complete chain. It's the combined efforts of everyone. That is food safety defined. I'm not going to have time to go into depth in some of these things, but things like as a roaster, your supply chain program and who you're buying from. Are all those companies that you're buying stuff from doing the appropriate measures, handling packaging properly, etc.? Okay, so it's a little bit of everyone. You need to be asking those questions. So here in the US, though, we have this Food Safety Modernization Act, so essentially this is already in place. This is what you have to be doing as a food manufacturer. Coffee is food. Their definition, and this is a worldwide definition, we put it in our mouth, we swallow, it's food. Okay, so and yes, right now this is a little bit more US based, but what is required per the FDA is really the same throughout the world. Any even larger food safety schemes require some of these same things. The vernacular may be different, how you report it might be different, but throughout the world, this is a pretty consistent overview on what you need to take into account. So the first that's required is preventive control. Okay, so part of FSMA was that any food company has to have preventative controls to prevent hazards from occurring. Okay, and what they are. So in the US, we already talked about GMPs, good manufacturing practices. For most of you, this is going to be the place to focus. It's cleaning, clean employees, clean buildings, etc. The rest of the world, these are also referred to as prerequisite programs. This is the foundation that you would build any food safety plan on anyway. Okay, so this is a major focus, and it's what I'm going to focus on over the next couple slides. Okay, then there's also how we start to separate companies is hazard identification. What hazards exist in my particular product versus others? So things like if I do coffee, you do beef, someone does cheese, shellfish, each one has different hazards. I, as a coffee roaster, shouldn't have to do what a shellfish manufacturer should have to do. They're different. I need to focus on my hazards. So that's how they differ. And then it's got to be documented. Recall, written by qualified individuals. Okay, so that exists, and that covers everything we basically need to worry about for COVID-19 as it comes to producers, importers, exporters, and roasters. Okay, so at the moment there is no, and Frank Yanis from the FDA emphatically said they see no changes that they would make into any of this as part of addressing. They feel they've already got it all handled, because it's not a food-borne transmitted virus, okay, that maybe some things would become a little bit more rigid, okay, but they're not seeing any changes. So nothing more is being mandated yet, okay. They also, one of the things they've announced, so part of FSMA was that you would be inspected every 3 to 5 years. Most other countries have something similar. I think Europe, it's every 2 to 4, if I recall. Okay. The FDA in particular has announced most unannounced inspections are going to be suspended. So they used to be they could show up without even telling you. If they do show up, they have now committed that they're not going to do it unannounced. They're going to give you some heads up. Okay. One, to protect their inspectors, number one, a little self-serving, but also to give you time to make sure everyone's protected. And they're actually thinking about cutting back on them entirely. They will focus just on high-risk facilities, which coffee is not one. Okay, cold brew does rise up to a higher level, but not even to the point where they'll probably be focusing on cold brew yet. Okay, so pluses, may not see an inspector for a little while, depending on how this all plays out. But don't make that seem like you can get away with stuff. still take this very seriously. I bring it up from the standpoint, for those of you who are inspected or have that issue, to breathe a little bit. But more importantly, this is in telling me that they don't really consider COVID-19 something that can be transmitted, just one more reinforcement to that, or they would be doing something about it. And then imported food safety. This one kind of applies. So importers, foreign supplier verification, okay, program that you needed to have in place, okay? And essentially what foreign supplier verification is you're still under the preventative control for human food rule. You're not controlling any of the hazards. So you need to make sure your farmer, your producer is, and if they aren't, communicate that to a roaster that here is the hazard that are not being controlled. You better do something about it. This is a whole kind of gray and what that actually means. Roasters, unless you're a importer of record of that lot of coffee, you're not under foreign supplier verification. Even FDA gets confused by that sometimes. But what they have done is in high-risk products, so this isn't really apropos to coffee, but in high-risk products, they are suspending the need for on-site audits, okay, as part of supplier verification. So if you had a high-risk product that you were importing into this country, you might have to have an on-site audit. In some cases, that on-site audit was done by the FDA. They're suspending, okay? So the takeaway from that is green coffee importers, or roasters storing a lot of green, there's nothing that we see on the horizon that will change, different test storage conditions and the like. FDA, and this is a resource I will get into, the resource drive that they've created at SCA, has issued a supply chain risk document that shows little concern over food during distribution, okay? I.e. where something's going to take more than a day or more to get to somebody. From everything we've seen from that former slide, COVID-19 doesn't last that long, okay? Short term might be an issue. So anyway, to all your importers, exporters, green coffee handlers looking for, what do I need to do? There's nothing that I see or foresee, and this is both FDA and other food safety experts, that will change in that regard. And then response. So this came right from Frank Yanis. Okay, FDA will not request you to put food on hold or be recalled as COVID-19, okay? He stressed that 2 or 3 times, okay? So it's nothing to be concerned about. However, here is, not your warning, but your be vigilant, okay? If you have a major outbreak and have no GMPs in place, so while the FDA probably won't rush out to do an inspection, current hysteria may drive a local authority, something like that, into your facility, okay, whether warranted or not, okay? So that's why we're going to get into, in a couple slides, the GMPs that need to be in place to just reinforce. You need to have that anyway. It's infectious disease. You need to have a policy on that, okay? So not to frighten you, okay, because even if they found you had no GMPs, your product probably still wouldn't be recalled. They may take other steps. So don't look at this as a get out of jail free card, so to speak. Take it seriously. But that was one of the questions that came up is, would this food be recalled? Okay. One of the other parts, and this could be a positive, trying to look at the glass half full in the current situation, the silver lining, if you will. Part of FSMA was supposed to require the importance of strengthening the different food safety agencies, both in the US and worldwide, to work together. Okay, and many of you may have experienced this, where you've had maybe an FDA inspector tell you one thing, a local state inspector tell you something different, and your GFSI scheme SQF say, no, I want it done this way. And it's like, you're not all playing from the same playbook. It gets very confusing. So one of the things that I thought would happen with FSMA is that they were going to bake this into the legislation to get them all to play together. It would be a more effective food safety plan for the country, as well as cost us less money and be more effective. And additionally, that would then roll out worldwide. Didn't really happen. I won't get into politics and you know, kind of all the red tape that occurred. This current scenario is forcing them, because they all have limited resources and to focus on. That's why, going back to that FDA slide of what they're going to focus on, they got together with all the other groups and, okay, what is the FDA, what is the USDA, what is the CD, what are their expertise and strengths, and how are they going to utilize them? And we're starting to see this happen on a national stage, irregardless of politics. Now, politics still exists, obviously, but this may be the silver lining, that we get more robust, strong food safety protocols throughout the world, and it'll cost us less and be more effective. But that's my secret hope. And then, kind of as a reminder to really bring this home, executives, owners of companies, okay, you're the one in the hot spot. You need to, this is baked into FSMA in the US and throughout the world, is that you need to make sure you're aware of what's going on. You're providing the resources, you know, for those who don't have a robust food safety plan in place or are getting there. That is the number. You've got to provide the resources. There's, you know, that is, it's not just current employees, you're going to add a couple hours a week to your current job. No, there's a cost to this, okay? And you need to be fully aware and make sure they are doing the appropriate measures. So if not, you could be held liable. So that's your little scare. Where do we go? What do you need to do at any size company? Okay. Well, larger companies already have this, but I would suggest starting where I like to start any consulting company or any consulting gig I have in helping companies develop this, is their philosophy. This is usually, when I took courses on this over the years, it was like the last documentation and philosophy were like the last 20 minutes of class of a 2 or 3 day course. To me, that's ineffective. You need to start that this is important. So go through and use this time to review your food safety plan. And it's just really built into the DNA of my company. Okay, and you know, it's part of looking at new products, marketing campaigns, the P&L. It's as important. So just a little public service announcement there. But the big thing that everyone should focus on and take a hard look at is your food safety plan, with a focus on good manufacturing practices. If you're not aware of this, the next couple of slides I'm going to go through kind of quick. Okay, because this is literally a half a day to a full day course. Okay, there are lots of local you know, service we offer as a company. I know some of my competition, I can highly recommend, offers these social trainings. Local colleges offer food safety trainings. If you're any of this you look at and don't understand the next couple of slides, get some training. Okay. GMPs in the US and then throughout the world, the same thing. They're the prerequisite programs. They're the foundation that you're going to build your food safety plan on. They are, you know, things as employee hygiene, cleaning, okay, sound building, cleanable materials, okay. These are the minimum guidelines. They exist for everyone. They're not different from any food manufacturer, okay. So they're found in the US in the Code of Federal Regulations. Okay, these are just general guidelines. Okay, each country, and this is the resources I'll be working on, has their own versions of this. Canada has slightly different, but if you go through them all and you understand all this, the language and vernacular is different. What you need to do is the same. Okay, but I will work on resources for you know, countries outside the U.S. who are fighting the same thing, and they're all basically focused in these areas. Okay, personal hygiene, your plant and grounds, sanitary operations, facilities and controls, okay, equipment and utensils, process controls, you know, is your refrigerator working properly? How do you know? Metal detector working if you need it, okay, in your warehouse and distribution. I might add, I just caught an error that under Code of Federal Regulations, I have it stated that it's 110.10 is the personal hygiene. That is incorrect. It's actually 117 now. There's some new GMPs. I haven't updated this. I apologize. Basically, it throws allergens in. It's the update with FSMA. So I just noticed that. For those of you on the call who know more than me. Don't call me on the carpet on that one. But it's the same thing. They basically agree. And what is this made up of? These are policies that you have, hairnets, no jewelry, no long fingernails, must wash hands. Okay. One thing I would really focus on is cell phones. This is one that just even before this outbreak, cell phones were kind of a gray area because cell phones are now something a supervisor employees use as part of their job. They may have a checklist that they've got, and it may be how they receive something. Okay. But there was a recent report by FDA, CDC, and the WHO, World Health Organization, on cell phones, and let's just say cell phones are disgusting. I think we're all realizing that. Okay, so comes into play in a plant. Should you let them in your plant? I would say no, except for supervisors who are using them for a particular reason, and they have some very strict methodology in how to use that cell phone. They go to the bathroom, it's cleaned, things like that. So it's kind of a newer one that's coming light to this. It actually started before COVID-19, but cell phones, think about how dirty they could be. Must wash hands. I think this is one that's been beat to death. I don't have to elaborate on that. Sanitation, pest control, condition of plant and surroundings, restrooms, utensils that are cleanable, raw materials off the floor, work in process. These are all basic GMPs that will help protect against COVID-19 as well. Okay, so again, I'm not going to go deep into all of these. There's large companies on the call that have this nailed down, smaller ones that are probably figuring it out. If any of these you're looking at going, oh my goodness, get some training, do some more reading. I will supply some resources in SEA's resource database to help you, guide you on that. But to focus everyone out of all the GMP policies is what you might take a deeper look at. Okay, so if you're halfway into building your GMPs, or even if you think you got them pretty solid, okay, I would do a gap analysis. So one of the documents I supplied that's in the resources is a gap analysis that we use. So what it is, a gap analysis, it goes through and lists every single policy. It's 3 or 4 pages long, and it covers every single one of those categories on what you should have in place. Not all of them are apropos. In some cases, proper refrigeration. Well, for regular coffee, we don't need that. But it's self-totaling, and you really need to get your GMPs up to about 90%. Okay, and what that means is that you have documents that say, here's what we're doing, and then you have documents that say, we're actually doing that. Okay, that would be a starting point to help guide you into what's important. Okay, for those companies who have been doing it a while, it's a good time to do an internal audit and go through and are we really handling all this? Do we need to upgrade any policy because of COVID-19? Okay, both from a risk management and protecting employees. Masks and gloves. Okay, this is my own personal advice. If I were, masks, there's some, should they be worn, should they not? In this case, I would say if that's an employee sick with COVID-19, no, they need to be sent home. Okay, but it may help within your workplace prevent transmission to other employees, so you can stay open. But gloves, I'd probably go to in production areas, along with hairnets. Big one is infectious illness policy. It is already required under GMPs, under FSMA, under any international food safety regulatory body that you have an infectious illness policy. So in the resources, I have also supplied one of the templates we've created here at Fire Answer for companies that I work with to help develop food safety plans. It's a draft template. Understand that any template you get from anybody or find online, they have to be adapted to your facility. And infectious illness policy isn't just, hey, if you're sick, stay home. It's training of employees. And I would say that next review sick policy, if you make it hard for people to take time off when they're sick, they're probably not going to stay home. So take a look. Those two go hand in hand. Really look at it. You want them to stay home. Make it easy. Okay, understand what they're up against. Now that's a company by company tough call, especially in uncertain economic times. But to me, it's a basic 101. But the infectious illness policy is not only it's training from staff to recognize symptoms, okay, and be able to kind of call it out, and then also employees. This would be one that I would upgrade if you have one, create one if you don't, and have some immediate training on, okay? Visitor policy. Now, I'll be really clear. Right now, I would have no visitors in my plant. I would say until this thing clears up, there is no reason people aren't looking for coffee roaster tours. I just think it's black and white. However, I would take a look at it. If you do, is strengthen that and something going forward. These are the things that infection illness will pass easily that way. And then the big one is review and strengthen sanitation SOPs, okay, which is everything from daily pre-op to daily cleaning, taking out garbage, cleaning things properly, disposing of waste products. Also in the resources I have supplied, there's in the US, there's EPA guidance. You have to use cleaning chemicals and like that are approved by them. They've created a document of things that are approved by them for a food plant, as well as kill COVID-19. So that is a resource I've supplied. You can even get on EPA.gov, and they have a whole COVID-19 area that you can go to. Okay, so review and strengthen sanitation SOPs, but there's nothing stronger being demanded by anyone other than having strong sanitation SOPs. Food service. This is the moving target, the most frustrating one. Okay, one is everything I've gone through as a retail cafe, food service operation, restaurant. You need to understand that whole picture. One is to help because we don't need the public freaking out on is coffee going to get, going to transmit it, possibly that cup. So put in some procedures that maybe eliminate that from happening. So it's all the same concerns and to-dos, okay? However, local and regional, it's changing constantly, and it is under, falls prey to hysteria. So in the resources, I have also supplied a US one, and I'm looking, I have a couple resources for international that I will be adding there in the coming days. Every state in the US is different, and city by city. The National Restaurant Association, and this is the resource I supplied, has a PDF that you can download that has every state, and it's broken by city, county on what they are requiring, and this is going to be a moving target. Take out and to go. How long are we going to be able to continue to do that? I don't know. I hope for a long time. Okay. But as we start to come back online to full regular business as usual, I think there may be some things that may be not required, but maybe you can put in place to really show the public, hey, you listened and you're not going to allow this ever to happen again. But understand your risks and implement strategies to manage. This is going to be a changing or a target. It is evolving. It's happening every day. So big resources, and I'm going to be adding to this into the resources that the SCA has, is any one of these, you can click on them and you can go into anything. This is where I've gathered almost all my information. And what I constantly have been doing for 7 years since I've been doing food safety consulting and training, these are the places I go to for answers when I don't know, okay? And all of them have on their homepage a link that here's what we're currently offering. So in the US Center for Disease Control, okay, there's some concern that they're, let's say, controlled by our current leadership with their messaging. I would say not true. I think there's some red tape that's holding some things up, but they are a go-to and have lots of research. National Coffee Association has a complete resources, FAQs on their site that goes into a lot of this stuff much deeper. Just in the US, so you understand, the NCA is a little better suited for regulatory type stuff than the SCA is. So pay attention to what's going on there. SCA, we've already talked about the resources that are going to be made available, and that is something I've committed to, and I'm going to try to get some of my, people I work with in food safety in coffee to help populate that. In Europe, you have the European Food Safety Authority, a lot of similar things to what FDA is doing, and that's the one I will be strengthening as well in some of their guidelines. The World Health Organization. This is kind of the go-to at the moment. They have a ton of resources. Use them, okay? OSHA is involved, okay? This may be not the FDA that a roasting plant's going to have to make changes to COVID-19. It may be OSHA. Protect your fellow employees. Still a work in process. Nothing definitive has come out. EPA when it comes to cleaning, and then local health and state authorities. All are interpreting this stuff a little bit different. So with that said, where do we go from here? There's a lot we don't know, okay? You need to pay attention. This is an evolving, moving target that doesn't look like it's gonna go away. So you need to stay on top of it. I'm committed, myself and my company, and I'm a long-term supporter of the SCA, where I'm going to be donating some of my time and energy to getting resources on the website to people in a time where you don't have a lot of money to spend because we don't know where to spend it on. But the key suggestions: be vigilant, okay, but don't overreact, okay, but don't stay informed, okay. We will come out the other side of this, and that'll happen by not overreacting to things, but staying informed. SCA, we as a community need to work together with membership, both association staffers, to disseminate the information coming through. My only concern about the resources being sent out is have they been disseminated? Have they been verified? Have they been vetted? This is going to be the role of the SCA and its members and staff to try to keep that information accurate and focused on coffee-related issues. And then support. This is just my, own wish is, I'm in coffee. Yes, I love coffee, but I'm in it because of the people in the community. And I think most of the people on this call are. We need to continue to support and assist the companies as we navigate these waters. It's going to be a battle, but I'm confident we will come out the other side. So that is my presentation. I will give the power back to the power that be.
That's here. Thank you very much, Mike. Very interesting, very informative. Really appreciate it. Yes, and just looking at the time, we do have, of course, time for questions. That's what we're ultimately here as well. Is there anybody from the other people on the panel that would like to start with questions? Yo, go, Jesse.
Firstly, Mike, thank you for a fantastic and really informative presentation. I've got a lot of questions that have been already answered by what you've covered, so thank you for that. But I just wanted to ask one, focusing on the materials in a coffee shop. So I'm the chair of the Barista Guild, so mine is directive for the cafes and baristas. And you outlined some really good sort of containment times for how long the virus would be existing on, say, cardboard and metal and plastic. But I was wondering for other materials that someone would be using in a cafe, such as towels or linens to sort of clean and dry. Do you have any information on how long the virus would exist on those kind of materials?
No, what's interesting about that is that was what the one I was larger focused on, because the first information that came out from WHO and CDC where we don't have to worry about, it doesn't survive. Okay, and I'm like, well, I don't think that's true, but so that has just recently come out what I published, and like I said, that's still work in progress. My concern was a towel. That to me is something that probably out of everything that's in a cafe could be, and there is no guidance on it. I did see something on the CDC website that said that was one of the things they had a team working on, but I haven't been able to find anything. So that's on my list of ongoing. That could be one that evolves. But also just to point back to, I can guarantee you it's going to be a state by state, city by city, town by town, whatever is going to be required if there is something. So at the moment, I don't know, but I am looking for more.
Thank you very much.
Jen, you look like you also have questions. Yes, go for it.
Okay, I guess my question is really just to follow up Jesse's question. Is, you know, I mean, so would you, are you suggesting that really people should be using like disposable wipes and things like that for disinfecting? I mean, until we know whether or not like cloths or sponges and things of that nature are, one, we're able to disinfect them, and two, like making sure that we're not just spreading contaminants around.
Yeah, that is officially the NRA, so the National Restaurant Association. In one of the documents I supplied, they have a general recommendations that's at the top of that link. Okay, and they are recommending disposable until some policies and procedures come out. And they even admit that it's there. They don't know. And I sense a little bit of a fear of putting something out and some state will do something different. And, you know, they're supposed to be the National Restaurant Association, not just, so it's evolving, but there is a little bit on the NRA on it. I think that's something we're going to see more guidance on in the coming week.
Hey guys, I can't raise my hand here, but can I jump in with a question?
Of course, Highland.
I'm raising my hand. You just can't see me. Mike, we were speaking about this earlier. That a tech has potential to touch 2 or 3 jobs a day. What can he communicate to the customer to set them at ease as they arrive on site for service?
There is, I want to see if I put this in. I may not put this resource in. I just came up with it. There is a guidance in that would fit that from the CDC, and it's for delivery of food. For people who are delivering food, what they should be doing, and as an employer who's making you deliver food, to me that would be the most related thing I've seen. I will. I'm not sure. I'll make sure when we're done here that I get that in there, and I'll send it to you personally just so you have it. That would be the closest guidance I've seen that comes to that sort of thing. I mean, you know, that honestly, I had that conversation actually with, you know, I share office space with part of Highland's company here in Rolling Meadows, and we decided to stay home. That's because of all their employees. No, I'm kidding, but it was a conversation with one of the techs going, I'm like, how are you? I mean, I can hide myself in my office or my basement and still work for the most part, and I can't even imagine. And there was some concern. So I would say those guidelines for delivery of food, because it goes 2 ways, not only what you're how you're going to support your employee for delivering, whether it's gloves, you know, personal protective equipment and that sort of thing, but it's also a requirement of, and this is what I see, I'm just starting to see this, I've noticed this in the last week, we've tried to do takeout from some of our favorite restaurants just to support. And there's one, which is the local bar pub that has the best nachos in the land. They're like, yeah, they showed up, they walked in the front door. And then we had another one that was my favorite pizza place that actually, she had a full garment on, gloves, called ahead to say, hey, I'm going to be leaving it outside. Please don't open the door until I'm gone. And I kind of went, you know, that's a company, they, you know, nothing against my old pub with the nachos, but that impressed me that they were going, you know, maybe it was a little overkill. But I would say for you, Highland, and for techs out there, that's probably the advice. It's 2 ways. It's both what you're going to demand of your employee and how you're going to support that. Then also, hey, customer, you have a role in this as well. And if they refuse to do it, might, you know, every company's going to make their own decision. But
well, just to speak to that, assuming that proper protocols and safe, and let's use, I mean, the example of the nachos pizza is a good example. Is how high is the spread risk when a tech can potentially touch 3 or 4 businesses a day? I mean, and I would like to speak to Jen in a roasting. I mean, a driver can hit 30 businesses in a day. Now, we're assuming that, I mean, assuming proper protocol, no one's walking around coughing and sneezing into the coffee. I mean, what's their spread risk?
We do not know. I would say it could be high. You know, this is one of my concerns of just where we're at now, trying to stay in business with online and restaurants, is all that is, you know, they didn't want to go that far, but is that going to be the next step? I'm not trying to scare people. I don't know that. I know no insight, but we don't really know. And that's why I would err to the side of caution. Gloves, possibly masks, and that sort of thing. But the more customers you visit, that risk has to go up. But there's no numbers I can point to.
Right.
I think Jen has a follow-up question, right?
Yeah, I do. It's, you know, a lot of it has been talked about, you know, and I think, you know, as roasters are working more towards like a, you know, not really working towards business to business customers and sort of doing consumer, straight to consumer deliveries and subscription services in order to like mitigate or just even to just stay in business throughout this pandemic, you know, and not go bankrupt. I think that it's not only just how many deliveries and how many touch points you have, but I mean, it's even the point of, you know, filling up the vehicle with fuel or, and then it's not, and then beyond deliveries, there's also just the receiving of packages. There's a lot of things that we receive, like not just green coffee, but boxes and such. And so, is there the correct, like what would be like the wiping down or disinfection process that one, like we can practice in our place of businesses, but also maybe do as a public service announcement to our customers and say, please, you know, we wear gloves and masks, but we recommend that you wipe down your package before you bring it into your home by chance.
So very good points. One of the things, you know, sanitation is a deep subject. I mean, when I teach food safety courses, it's probably a full day on thinking through different services and different areas and all that sort of thing. I have a sanitation guide I found, because I steal shamelessly from the web when I can, on sanitation. Out of all of them, I found it was a pretty good. I think it was from Cornell, if I recall. I will find that and upload that. That is a good overall to understand. Here's what I'm looking at. This is what, because there's understanding the difference between cleaning and sanitizing, two different things. You know, so it's a great read on that, and we can go on hours and hours on it. What is actually recommended? So, like one of the questions I saw came up is, you know, how long does it stay on packaging? Other than those rough times, days that I showed, and that's just from the New England study. There's others. There's no definitive. I do know it is currently being studied by CDC. It was a request of the FDA to give some more pertinent. How long does it stay on? All that's come out is, you know, something that ships for longer than 24 hours. So it's been on a truck or whatever. Don't have a big concern. They're not even concerned, but
right.
All small little roasters, we're completely different. We're literally handling it across the customer. We're putting, they can have it the next day. So that's a different one. So there's no real guidance to show should it be. I would probably, and this is how I've even changed just in the last couple of days. I mean, 2 weeks ago, not that I didn't take this seriously, but I didn't see this. And a week ago, oh, it's here. We got to do something. And just in the last couple of days, as I'm starting to read more info, I would probably, you know, one, you know, really enforce, you know, in a roastery, you know, hand washing before they go back, really looking at employees coming in, monitoring health, probably after they put on gloves. The things you got to think through, and this comes through with the masks and the, you know, hairnets and gloves. Every time they go to the bathroom, those gloves are thrown out. Anytime they, you know, whatever, no scratching the face. It's tougher to achieve than you think. Yeah. I've been counting the amount of times I've touched. It's a little crazy. So, but I will get some of those sanitation kind of guidelines and tutorials I found helpful, that I give, you know, people who I do work with. I'll get them in there. When, and I've committed to this, is as FDA or CDC comes up with new guidelines or publish these, I will get them out and disseminate them to all. But right now, other than what I showed you, and even like I said there, that is just those studies. The New England study, I think, came out Monday this week. CDC had one that came out Wednesday that updated, but it was pretty close. I mean, what it says is we should do copper everything, but probably a little expensive.
Yeah, go Jesse, please.
Firstly, obviously, IBRIC coffee brewers will be fine for the coffee brewing for copper. So maybe we should all move to IBRIC. But my actual question is just around the lifespan of gloves. We just had someone from the Barista Guild just chime in with the question, you know, if somebody's customer facing and they are maybe delivering takeaway coffees through a chute or dealing with pastries and obviously you just said about going to the bathroom and then changing gloves, but is there anything that you'd advise around, you know, when people should regularly be changing the gloves? I don't expect people to be changing them once a day, but, you know, is there anything in this climate where they should be changing them per customer, for example?
That is up to your risk assessment. Okay, and then this is typical food safety, and it's the frustrating thing when I'm out teaching, educating, and even consulting, is they want, okay, what do we need to do? What's the black and white? So I pass this inspection, or, you know, I'm being compliant regulatory, and I give them my advice based on 35 plus years of experience of doing this, and I say, but you're going to have that crazy inspector, and with the current hysteria, you know, so you've got to. So my suggestion is, one, there's no regulatory thing at the moment. That could change as we learn more. I don't think it will, but you need to look at it. What do you feel? What does you feel the risk is? You got to look at your operation, and it's you know, in food safety we use HACCP, which, you know, hazard, and we look at critical control points. Where could we possibly get infected or infect someone, and how do we prevent that? I would say gloves, multiple times a day, probably changing. We just went yesterday and picked up a prescription from Walgreens, and I sat there and we went through the drive-through. Not really because we were afraid, it was just quicker. I'm lazy. I don't want to get out and walk. This body wasn't built on exercise. Anyway, but I saw them, every customer would leave. Now, this is Walgreens pharmacy. They would wipe down the whole area, take off their gloves, put on, and wouldn't put on new ones till a new customer came. Now, they're Walgreens pharmacy, so they're going to be, but that stuck in my head. I'm like, no, wait a minute. No, they've really thought through. So you've really got to look at your operation. What are the points of contact? Where could it, and how do we feel good? If you could look in the mirror, and this is what I tell people, and you look at it, I feel pretty good about this, and you've based it on everything we've talked about, you probably have something robust. But it's really hard to give very precise, because everybody's operation is a little bit different. You know, so I would, in this case, probably go above and beyond what any regulatory agency is requiring you to do until we know better.
Yeah, one thing that also popped up in my mind is also what you mentioned already, Mike, is like always do look at your local authorities, right? Look at what they recommend, because like the face masks, I think in the Czech Republic, you have to wear them, like if you go out into the public, right? So always go back to your local authorities to check what's the recommendations there and what they actually require.
Well, but that's a big one with face masks. I mean, right now, I've seen various reports from CDC on the WHO on should it, and part of it, I think it's coming from they want to protect face masks for healthcare workers, is the underlying tone, which I get and I totally appreciate. But there's not much guidance. But when you get into it, the conversation we were just having about gloves, how often should you change that mask? Where should you change it? I mean, these are the things that, you know, there's not a lot of guidance, not much, but I do know, like I have friends in coffee in Asia, in China, who, you know, if you go out of the house without a mask, you're scorned upon. In some cases, you're beat up. You know, here you're looked at, oh, you're that crazy, you know, so kind of a different culture thing. And I'm not saying one is right, one or wrong. It's just every part of the world's a little bit different how they look at it.
Yeah, definitely. I do think we would have time for one more question. I don't know, Highland, I can't see your hand. You have to verbally raise your hand.
Well, something I saw in an article was that there was I don't remember where it was, but that there was a recommendation of neoprene gloves over latex gloves. Do you know anything that could speak to that?
No, but I am recalling, and this is something I'll make a note on, is it wasn't because of this current situation. It was a company I was preparing for an audit who they had some off-brand, and they were looking for some documentation to support, you know, because in any food safety, when you make a decision on how you're going to control something, the more documentation and resources you have to back up, you know, it wasn't just Mike Ebert in my basement going, oh, I think this is effective. No, I got to point to research and studies and doing as much as possible. And there was something on the effectiveness of different gloves for different operations, but it's drawing a blank. I'll try to come up with something on that. But beyond that, I haven't seen much written on the subject.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, Jen, of course.
So I actually, on the same sort of in the same vein, I heard, I've been listening to a lot of interviews over like public radio and such, listening to doctors give advice. And this one was specifically about masks, which we just discussed. And a lot of doctors were advising that it wasn't necessary to have like an N95 mask, except for maybe if you are in the medical profession in certain instances that doctors or nurses need to use them, and that regular like surgical style masks are really great for the public to help stop spread contamination. And the way it was expressed to me from a friend in a culture that regularly uses masks is that you're considered like rude if you're not wearing a mask, because one way to express your compassion is by showing, by wearing the mask, that you care about the other person. I mean, in a way, you can kind of extend it towards a lot of what we do in specialty coffee with hospitality. You know, like, I care about my customer, therefore I'm going to wear this mask in case I cough. You know, I mean, nobody is trying to cough on anybody's food. Like, coughs usually happen as an accident. You know, it's something that happens that you do. So I don't know. I think I'm pretty into masks. I guess that was more of a statement rather than a question, but I would love your opinion, Mike.
You know, I've done a lot of work in Asia. When I first started this business, I did a lot of training in Asia, and it was without even any kind of what's going on right now. You saw them a lot. I mean, it was, you know, maybe not 50%. I've kind of come full circle, and I've been thinking through, you know, in preparing for this, if I was still running my old roasting plant and had 50 employees in the back, what would be my steps? You know, and it would be a lot of what I already talked about, but I'd really look at some kind of separation, you know, of departments and keeping it. But I would probably do masks, both from a protect my employees, but also just from a risk management. I wanted to stay in business. And then for an employee gets sick, in order for me to send them home and pay for their leave, I need to still be selling coffee. So I would probably go that just from a you know, kind of a risk management, at least short term in this environment, to say, hey, you're going to wear them if I can't keep you at least 6 feet away, which typically in a plant would be. So I've kind of come full circle. However, I wanted to prepare for this. I went looking for research on not only types of masks, but also proper use, and there is no really kind of clear document on like procedures for them. So I imagine that will be coming, you know, but I would probably go that way in the utmost of protecting my employees. So.
Yeah,
okay,
great.
one more thing.
Oh, okay, of course, go Jen.
Just as a compassion thing, I was just here. I work at a shared roasting facility, and you know, every roasting company that operates out of it has a different idea of what they should be doing. Some of them have just fully shut down. Some of them are trying to do you know, as much as they can to stay in operations, and everyone is really flexing really hard with like social distancing and making sure that they, you know, like, even though we supply cleaning materials, they always bring their own, which I think is fantastic. But I think, like, even though we're being very, very careful about like ourselves, I was just thinking about like compassion again. And, you know, like, all of these companies that are trying to stay in business rely heavily on different courier services, whether that is like a freight company or a postal service or a shipping company, delivery, you know, people who are delivering maybe food to cafes, whatever it might be. And like, those are people that we usually see regularly. They're people that we know and have formed relationships with. And with those people, like, I've let all of them know that they're welcome, because, you know, regular hand washing is like really important in order to like stay healthy and clean. And I've let all of them know that they're welcome to come in to like wash their hands through their daily routines, because they are probably working out of a truck, you know, most of the day. Anyway, I mean, I guess I am exposing myself to a little bit of risk, but, you know, I'd rather be compassionate.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing, Jen. Thank you very much for joining the webinar. Thank you very much, Mike.
You're welcome.
I do wanted to point out one last time, there's the www.sea.coffee/COVID-19 page where you'll find a lot of the resources we talked about. Also, that's where Mike is going to upload things he's talked about or already has. Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for joining, Jesse, Jan, and Hylan, representing the guilds. Very happy that we got off the first webinar, and we'll do one next week again on mental health. I'm very excited about that. So stay tuned for those things. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic day, evening, and stay safe and wash your hands.
Wash your hands.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.